So we'll do quite a lot of meditation in these days together. And the key point is to watch how you cheat yourself by falling asleep in the thought. Thoughts will give you meaning, but the kind of meaning that they give you is enclosed, it's encapsulated, it's a sealed world. So, if you think of the various kinds of prejudice which have been made more conscious in the last 150 years, we have more consciousness now about racist attitudes, about anti-Semitic attitudes, about denigration of women attitudes. We can see all over the world that groups develop prejudices, and we see how completely limiting it is to other people's existences if they're trapped inside a prejudice, whether it's against homosexuality or particular sexual orientation or a desire to live in poverty or a desire to make a lot of money. We have all kinds of strong views about patterns. When I have a strong view, I feel powerful because I know something definite. I can get the number of that person. It's very bad that people do these things. Whether you think Mr. Putin is good or bad is an opinion. Some people like Mr. Putin, some people don't. Is he good or bad? It depends. It depends. Nobody's entirely bad. You may have a political decision that a certain small man born in Linz is very, very bad, and if you say he's good, then you get in trouble. But is he really bad? Some people liked him. Oh, that's because they were caught by his magnetic personality. Some people liked him. Nothing is entirely good, nothing is entirely bad. That's why our world is complicated. That's why you can't work out who is the good guy and the bad guy. So how do we live with complexity? We have to see that the conceptually based interpretive schemas that we use, how we make sense of the world, how we construe it, how we put it together, is inadequate for the job. That we construct interpretations which do not have sufficient validity. So, for example, when we had big development of plastics from these side products of the oil industry in the first case, there was a lot of extra stuff made in the production of oil, and you could transform it and make plastics. Plastics were an amazing thing. Everywhere there was plastics. People wanted plastic surfaces in their house because they're very easy to clean. And now, later, we see, oh, the fish in the sea all have little bits of plastic in them. There's plastic everywhere, and it's not a good thing. But at one time it was a really good thing because it was cheap and cheerful and brightly colored and really useful and easy to mold. This is something wonderful, and now we think, shit, this is really toxic, it's spoiling our world. The savior becomes the demon. And you can see that in the area of food. Butter is good for you, no butter is going to kill you. What can you trust? People say, oh, if you have arthritis, you shouldn't eat any vegetables that came from South America because gives you bother. Then you read another book and another book and another book. It's all ideas. Ideas. And there'll be some truth in the idea and some things which are a bit more obscure. So this is what it means when it says that conceptual elaboration is the engine and the fuel that drives samsara. That our world is made of thoughts. It's made of interpretations which formulate as narratives. We talk about the world. And this is the main force that we have to face when we do meditation, because we sit in a meditation and our mind as a field of stories and grasping and accepting and rejecting continues to pulsate. How do we relax out of that? Well, you can't relax as an intentional focus. This is why we study the view or the ethos or the orientation of Dharma, in our case particularly Dzogchen, because the view helps us to have a more open perspective in which we start to see that what we had taken to be our friend is not necessarily our friend, or rather, our friend is useful in certain situations and not in others. If you want to function in the world, you absolutely have to have a skill in moving concepts. You wouldn't be able to earn any money unless you could elaborate some kind of, whether you run workshops or you work in a bank, you're dealing with narrative structures. You have to be able to participate in that story, accommodate the patterning of your thoughts and your way of speaking so that you seem like an intelligent, helpful person to other people. Otherwise, nobody's going to give you any money. It's not that the thoughts are the enemy, it's the fact that the thoughts function well in certain areas of existence, but not in terms of clarifying what is our true or actual identity. That is to say, if we exist through telling stories about ourselves, we remain in that gap of aboutness. Because there is the direct presence of here we are, and that's true for each of us, and then we have the story about us. So the story wraps itself around us, and we see the story, not the directness. So when we do the practice, it's not to blame the thought. It's not that the thoughts are bad or out to get us or the enemy. They're not obscurations. We just have to see we don't need them. We don't need them. So, we all suffer from psychobulimia. We like to binge on thoughts and then we puke them out after a while. So, if you imagine that these pattern of thoughts are like an endless series of large slices of chocolate cake. A little is quite good, but a whole chocolate cake, that's getting kind of extreme. So, when the thoughts are arising in the mind, do you need them? What do you need them for? The function of the thought is to bring you into relation in the domain of duality. That's what thoughts do. They link us subject to object, object to subject. I think we all know this to be the case. So if I merge with the thoughts, if I entertain the thoughts, it will keep me operating on that bandwidth, because that's what they do. They are the kind of guarantors of our understanding that the world is constituted out of many different things, and some we like and some we don't like, and so we construct our personal world. That's what they do. That's not bad in itself. We can't be in the world with others without that. But when we want to see what is the ground of these thoughts, the thoughts are structurally incapable of telling the truth about themselves. Because the thought says, I'm something. That's why you want me. I'm something. The thought can't say, I'm nothing. Because the thoughts only survive if they can hook enough interest. And if they say, nothing here, okay, fuck off. I want you to love me. I'm really special. So, if you like, your mind, when you meditate, is some vast dating website. And each thought is arising, posing with a nice little best aspect. I'm a fascinating person. So that's why we get sucked into the thoughts, because they're maintaining our familiar sense of self. You don't have to stop the thought. but you don't need them for the purposes of this project. When you go swimming in the sea, you might have a snorkel and little flippers to put on your feet, but if you go walking in the hills, you don't need a snorkel and you don't need flippers, you need climbing boots. So what are we going to give privileging to in the meditation? Non-involvement, relaxed. The more we can see nothing to do with me, allowing the thoughts to self-liberate, to go free by themselves, which of course they always do. If the object is nothing to do with me, then the subject starts to be revealed in its true form. As long as the thought seems to be something to do with me, I incorporate the appearance of the thought in my persona, in my presentational self, and then I have that constructed sense of identity. So releasing on the object allows the subject to go free. Releasing on the subject allows the object to go free. I don't need the thought. The ego needs the thought. The ego is our site of participation in duality. The ego composes itself, constitutes itself out of patterns of thought, feeling, memory, and so on. So, if I don't merge, if I don't identify, if I'm relaxed, it's just patterns moving through. Now I'm more relaxed. I don't need them. And the more I see I don't need them, we start to see, I really don't need them. I really, really don't need them. And then we start to see what the texts say when they say, the mind is complete from the very beginning. This is Dzogchen Chimpo, the great completion. The mind is complete, self-sufficient, not dependent on anything, uncompounded. Oh, I'm just here. So awareness, presence, which is free of intrinsic content and which requires no grasping at contents to fill itself up, because it's at peace, contented, satisfied. This awareness has no problem with allowing the interactive thoughts of participation in the world to arise. So then we see how primordial purity, or the empty nature of the mind itself, is non-dual or inseparable from all the forms which arise as we participate in the world. Because these forms are arising out of emptiness, they are illusion. Illusion doesn't mean something vague and hazy, it's extremely precise. Tea doesn't taste like coffee, which doesn't taste like orange juice. Each phenomena in the world is redolent in color, smell, shape, and so on. But it's not held in that form by its own internal self-definition. So this is a rough overview of what we want to start to focus on. What is the ground or the basis out of which experience is arising moment by moment? And the key thing is to be very kind to ourselves. Sometimes meditation seems to go well, sometimes it's very difficult. Sometimes we might be interested in what's going on, sometimes we might seem bored. However the mind is, allow it to be as it is. If you go into judgment about yourself and say, I would be better if I was more like this or more like that, then what you're doing is manifesting your inner duality, your inner subject and inner object. I have to control myself so that I don't do that. This is what you learn in childhood, in which we carry on all of our lives to get to work on time and pay the bills on time and so on. We are self-managing self as object is being shaped and molded by self as subject. In this inner dialogue, this inner dualistic structure parallels subject and object functioning in the world. So in our practice, we're not trying to correct the mind. We're not starting with any template or regulatory structure that helps us to see, oh, this thought is intrinsically truly better than that thought. There is no truth in the value in the thought. It's always projected. Some people like some things that we don't like. They really, really do. Some people like food we wouldn't eat. Some people like music we wouldn't listen to. And some people want to vote for dictators. Some people become soldiers and they're quite excited with the idea of putting a bayonet in someone. Personally, I wouldn't like to do that. But some people do. How do they do that? Because of the patterning of their mind. Oh, but it's much better to help people than to harm them. On one level, of course, that is true. But I want to help people and I want to harm people. It's very similar grammatically. I want to do this or do that. I want to eat oranges. No, I want to eat bananas. I want to help people. I want to kill people. Grammatically, it's the same. Subject onto object. We attribute particular value. If someone is, invading your country, you might be quite glad to have soldiers who are willing to kill on your behalf. You might be, like me, a hypocritical meat eater who is quite happy for other people to work in the abattoir so that I can have a kebab from time to time. I don't particularly want to cut the throat of a goat. I really don't want to cut the throat of a goat. But if somebody's cooked some goat curry, I'm quite happy to eat it. So we need to know our own deviousness, our own mental cheating, the games that we play in order to not confront ourselves with the fault lines in the fabrication that we have of ourselves. It's not that you suddenly have to think, oh, from this day onwards I will never ever do that, because that kind of New Year resolution usually doesn't last very long. Much more important is to see, oh, these are mental structures and they are intrinsically limited. They cannot be the whole story. So as long as I construct my life on the basis of concepts, there will be limited validity to what I believe in and what I act on the basis of. So the first thing we need to do is start to be more curious about how we are. And the best way to do that is to be kind to ourselves, not to judge ourselves, but just to gently see, oh yeah, liar and cheater, full of funny stories. Okay, let's see the nature of these funny stories. How do I cheat myself? How do I cheat other people? What image of myself do I want to present to other people? Because it's not that we are uniquely bad in doing that. This is how the game of samsara arises. So if we want to see the intrinsic wholeness of ourselves, what we need to do is to recognize how we fragment ourselves by hiding one bit of ourselves from another. We split ourselves, and through that self-splitting maintain the split of the world. And if we're saying Dzogchen is complete from the very beginning, means never fragmented, never split, never divided, then all the fragments are allowed. All the fragments are already within the great completion. So if you take a harsh, judgmental attitude towards yourself, you're endlessly trying to separate out and make hierarchies of value. And then, how will you see the whole? if you're endlessly moving all the little bits around. So you just have more and more complicated patterning of fragments. Of course, in the world we need to make ethical choices, which involves a degree of self-regulation. But for the point of view of the practice, we relax and open.